this video, I'm going to be talking about the things that surprised me about Barretto when I first moved here 6.5 years ago, and then surprised me over the last several years. The first place that surprised me is where I am right now in Alta Vista. I found out about Alta Vista the first couple of weeks I was here. I was watching a football game at the Arizona, and the only other guy there watching the game, and I got talking, and he said he lived in Alta Vista, and I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, I'll show you." He had a trike and he brought me here. And you get here by going up the street that's opposite Beloit Long Beach Road. Instead of turning on Beloit Long Beach Road, you turn the other direction on the street that starts there. And I was quite surprised when I came here. There are beautiful homes here. It's a development where people buy property and then build custom homes. And there are some amazingly beautiful homes, and later on, as we get near the top, I'll show you some views that you get from up here. This development has been here for many years. Not a lot of houses were built a few years ago, but a lot more houses are being built now. Except for some occasional construction noises, it's very quiet up here. Very few vehicles go by. It's very peaceful. What an amazing place, so close to Little Barretto. The other surprise I had early in my retirement here in Barretto was learning about the trails in the mountains. I hadn't thought about walking in the mountains before. I didn't know there were trails when I first got here, and no one talked about it. I didn't even know if you were allowed to go up on those mountains or not. I got involved with the Hash House Harriers here in Barretto, and I learned, yes, indeed, there's a lot of hiking in these mountains. Beautiful trails, absolutely beautiful. Just so close to the highway, it's unbelievable that you can get away from all that noise and get into a beautiful area with nice mountain trails. It's so cool when you get back here under the trees. What's interesting about these trails in the mountain is that very few people hike these trails. Very few. You'll see the Hash House Harriers on these trails. Very few Filipinos. The Filipinos you see will be the ones who live up here. There are a few houses way up in the mountains. People actually live up there. You wonder, wow, amazing. Pretty tough commute. Pretty tough when you want a beer. But it's gorgeous views from up there. They have a good way of life other than the difficulty of getting to their house. But you will rarely see Filipinos just hiking for the fun of it. They're not into doing that. I'm not going to go to the top of this mountain, but up there, you get to the top. It's beautiful. There's a little house that somebody lives in. That's the kind of thing you see out in the mountains. Very interesting way of life. When I first came to the Philippines back in 2006, I figured there would be a lot of insects, flies, mosquitoes, big flying things that I never saw before in my life. I mean, after all, this is tropics, a lot of water, a lot of green, a lot of rain, at least half the year, a lot of rain. But it didn't turn out that way here in Barretto. Now in the Philippines, of course, there are areas where there are lots of mosquitoes and people have to live under mosquito nets at night or sleep under nets at night. But here in Barretto, there aren't a whole lot of mosquitoes, nothing like I expected. My parents used to live in Pennsylvania, and when I would visit, I would get covered with mosquito bites in just one day, dozens of bites in one day, and you couldn't sit out in the late or afternoon, early evening to eat because of all the flies. So if you wanted to be out, you had to be in a screened porch. In the Philippines, I figured it would be at least that bad, but not here in Barretto. Not a lot of mosquitoes. Actually, there's a lot of runoff of the water because of the mountains and the way the water runs to the bay. There's not a lot sitting around except in the drainage canals. So there are a few mosquitoes. I would say I get bit maybe once a week. I get a bite. It's not much. And there aren't a lot of flies. You can eat out at a restaurant outside under a cover, enjoy the bay and not be attacked by flies. There are some, but not anywhere near that I expected, so that's a surprise. Now there are areas in Olongapo with mosquitoes. In other areas they have mosquitoes, but not here to very much of a big degree. So that's good news for the people living here. And another surprise were the restaurants. Now, this is a tourist area, so it's not a surprise there are many restaurants, but when I first came here and visited, I only would go to 3 or 4 different restaurants at the most. And I thought, well, that's pretty good. But after retiring here, I realized this is a great place for restaurants. There's quite a few. There's at least a dozen restaurants right here in Barretto that I could highly recommend. And then there are restaurants in other areas of Olongapo, especially up on the old airbase. So there's a ton of restaurants. Thanks to this being a tourist area, there are restaurants connected to hotels and several standalone restaurants that are excellent. So that was a bit of a surprise in coming here. One thing you cannot criticize the Subic Bay area for is the lack of decent restaurants. Plenty here, and plenty of restaurants that foreigners would enjoy. Talking about a big surprise. This is literally a big surprise. The Central Park Reef Hotel. That was a big surprise when it was built. I had no idea something this big and beautiful would be built. It's a nice one. Underground parking, 2 swimming pools, 2 restaurants, beautiful rooms, nice view of the bay. Really, really a nice hotel, and really worthwhile staying there if you ever have a chance. So it was definitely a surprise here in Barretto. Divi Mart, a big box store, a grocery store, household goods, clothes. Nothing unusual about a big box store, except here in Barretto, it was a surprise. The nearest big box store before this was built was in Subic City, a few kilometers away. So it was a shocker when they started building it. And when it was built, it was a big deal. Thousands of people visited the first few days. The first day was really amazing, with a big traffic jam in Barretto. But this was a big deal, the very first big store here in Barretto. So when this big box store was built later after Divi Mart, that was not such a big surprise. If one is here, why not another one right next door? But what is surprising about this store is how nice it is inside. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's something you would see in the United States, such as Lowe's. This is a home improvement store. They sell a lot of stuff for the home. Tile, tools, fixtures, light fixtures, plumbing fixtures. A very beautiful store, and that's what's surprising about it. I didn't expect such a big, beautiful store here in Barretto. Tremendous amount of tile in this store. Huge amount. There's another big tile store coming to town right next to the Central Park Reef Hotel. That's something I wonder about. A lot of plumbing wares here, a lot of fixtures. Hardware section over there. This is quite a store for little Barretto. Amazing. Truly amazing. Why would Jollibee be such a surprise here in Barretto? The most popular franchise in all the country. They're everywhere. How could it be a surprise? Sorry for the traffic here. Well, for the first few years I was here, the closest Jollibee was a few kilometers away in Subic City. I didn't think there would ever be a Jollibee here in Barretto. I never really thought that. I figured if it was going to be, they would have had it a long time ago. I figured it had to do with marketing, research. They probably figured the population density wasn't enough. But here it is. Amazing. Something I never thought would happen. So that ends this video covering the surprises I've had here in Little Barretto as I stand in front of the Wilcon Depot sign. And I'm sure there's more surprises in store here in Barretto.